will start in the NBA. The forwards, the centers, and all the guards, the ones you see.
Man, I had to start that off. Classic from Curtis Blow. Davey D hanging out with you this afternoon. Want to say what's up to everybody. And for those who are watching and got this chance to see the video, you saw Curtis Blow with the Jerry curl and a bunch of Bruce Lee crime fighters in the background as they were playing basketball. What you didn't see was our guest, Dave Zirin, columnist for The Nation, Edge of Sports, the author of several books. He's here in the building with us. What you didn't see was this esteemed gentleman who will pack houses and talk politics and give you the lowdown of everything you need to know about sports and progressive thought. He was singing every word. Am I lying? Did he not know every lyric to this song? I mean, you were well-rounded, my friend.
Curtis Blow. I mean, it's an article of faith that you have to know some Curtis Blow rhymes.
I mean, you and Mike Dyson could be in the same room.
We've had some conversations.
Did you really?
Oh,
so
yes.
Do you go trade barb for barb with the lines?
It's interesting. Every time I've had Mike on my show, I've been on his show, he always slips in a couple of lyrics just right in the middle of one of his epic flows of thought.
Right.
Just slips it in there, just so you know he's serious and he knows what he's doing.
But you were serious here, too.
Hey.
You know, I mean, you gave Curtis Blow a run for the money.
Look, I'm from New York City, and I know sometimes people throw that down in a very obnoxious way.
Right.
But there's a reason why we throw it down in an obnoxious way, because we were listening to this stuff when it was thought to be either a fad or just not known.
Right.
I'll never forget when you tweeted, Davey D. You tweeted recently that it was the anniversary of the death of Scott LaRock.
Right.
And I don't know how many people tweeted you back on that, but when you tweeted that out, I had like a tidal wave of flashbacks in my head.
Yeah.
That was like a day of mourning in my junior high.
Right,
It was
right.
a big deal.
Right, Scott LaRock was classic.
Absolutely.
I mean, iconic figure. Mm-hmm. One of the first deaths in hip-hop that, you know, for somebody that large and still unsolved, along with Tupac and Biggie and Jam Master Jay.
Exactly.
All these unsolved murders in the hip-hop world.
Exactly. And you think about how global the discussions have been about Tupac and Biggie. Every corner of the earth, T-shirts and little bootleg stalls in South America, Thailand, and then there's Scott LaRock, who didn't get much beyond the South Bronx.
But there'd be none of these
Yes,
other figures had it not been for Scott LaRock. Bless his heart, he was an iconic figure. And Dave Zirin is our guest this afternoon. Edge of Sports. First of all, it's good to have you in the Bay Area. But I had to start off with the basketball theme.
Sure.
Because just as we're sitting here, everybody, this is the Bay Area, the home of a gentleman who is making a lot of noise, Jeremy Lin.
Yes.
He's from these parts. There are people around here that know him. You know, right in his room. It's like, I know Jeremy. That's
Right.
my homie. So he's a big deal. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. They came up with T-shirts, Lintastic, we're Linning, you know, Linomania, and then it just disappeared. And, you know, as a sports person, I wanted you to give your assessment of this whole phenomenon. And now the breaking news is that they fired the Knicks head coach.
Yeah, he resigned.
And
Mike
everybody's
D'Antoni.
anticipating that Jeremy Lin is about to come back. But you tell us what you think.
Okay, there's so many different ways to have this discussion about Jeremy Lin. We could talk about it just from a straight hoops perspective, from a socio-political perspective, from a cultural perspective. I mean, let's just do the first starting point, though.
Okay.
And that's that Jeremy Lin is not Tim Tebow. Let's just start with that right now.
He's not Tim Tebow.
No, Tim
so
Tebow.
You're not a Tim Tebow fan.
Well, Tim Tebow is someone who doesn't actually have the ability to play quarterback, and yet he was lauded as being like this incredible sensation. I mean, we have to stop trafficking in the fiction that Tim Tebow is a real professional athlete.
Okay.
But so move on from there for a second. Jeremy Lin is somebody who set the NBA record since the post-NBA ABA merger for most points in his first 6 games.
Okay.
Ever. And the only person in the history of the league who had more in his first 6 games, someone you might have heard of named Wilt Chamberlain.
I've heard
So
of him.
nobody should say that he's somehow a flash in the pan or somebody who was just given a leg up because he was kind of a cultural curio, like, oh, look at the Chinese/Taiwanese American player from Harvard. No. This is somebody who had skills for days.
Okay.
And he started a very important discussion. I just did an article in The Nation about this where I interviewed a friend of ours, Jeff Chang. I interviewed another person local to this area named William Wong, a longtime journalist.
Right.
And a woman named Helen Jim, who's an amazing community activist out in Chinatown in Philadelphia. And what they all said was, look, Jeremy Lin says about the power of sports, like him coming on the scene allowed us to have a discussion about invisibility and Asian America and the ability to speak about Asian American racism. And this is a discussion that we struggle to have on college campuses,
Right.
let alone in the broader culture.
But sports has always played that role.
Exactly.
Sports has always allowed us to have a entryway into deeper politics. Muhammad Ali, Jackie Robinson, Jim Thorpe,
I think that if
Paul Robinson.
Yes. I think that if a loud and proud Native American player was playing in the NFL and was a sensation a la Jeremy Lin and said publicly, this Washington Redskins name is a racist slur and I want no part of it, it would advance that discussion exponentially.
Right.
Exponentially, and allow for a whole different kind of debate. The same way when Jeremy Lin stepped up, and all of a sudden a lot of like you remember when, like when Shaquille O'Neal made fun of Yao Ming, and he made like a funny Chinese voice and said this is how Yao Ming talks, and,
Right.
and it wasn't uncommon for Yao Ming would go up and down the court and announcers would be like, look at the big Chinaman go, look at the Chinaman, and it's like here comes Jeremy Lin though, and he can speak for himself. He's articulate. Unlike Yao Ming, he's not scared of being put in a camp or something, or being sent home, or any sort of external international pressures that were always exerted upon Yao Ming. And here's Jeremy Lin, who went to Harvard, and he speaks out against some of this racism, and other people in society speak out against it. And the next thing you know, you have an entirely different kind of discussion. And
Right.
that's the power of sports. And as you said, this is something that has always existed in the intersection of sports and society.
But at the same time, he did face a lot of stuff. I mean, there's the infamous New York Post or ESPN headlines that when he first lost his game, one of the first losses, they put on the headline, "Chink in the armor." And that set off a whole firestorm. And then we have Jason Whitlock, conservative, columnist, who made a joke, and said, when Lin was scoring points, he said there's going to be lots of loving tonight, all 2 inches of it, and so there was a lot of criticism about that. And you would think that why would even people in 2012 go there?
Exactly. And Saturday Night Live did a brilliant sketch about this, where they did a sketch with a whole panel of SportsCenter talking heads and just an incredible sensitivity and reverence for African American history in sports, which does exist, like Jackie Robinson, and they say his name solemnly. And they say he broke through cultural barriers to teach us about tolerance. And then they go back and it's like a big gong and making fun of Jeremy Lin. And Jeff Chang had a great story about talking with Seth Meyers, who's the chief writer over at Saturday Night Live. And Seth Meyers was speaking over at Stanford, and Jeff got to talk to him. And Seth Meyers said, we just wanted to have a sketch that, and he said, we worked so hard on it. First, he admitted this. He said, we don't do sketches about Asian American racism on Saturday Night Live,
Right.
So it's just doing that. It took forever to figure out, what was the right tone, what should the jokes be. And then he said, finally, we just decided that our overarching theme should be, we want to do a skit that Jeremy Lin would watch and laugh.
Right.
And as Jeff said, and I'm not going to cuss on the air because I know you got to not do that, but Jeff cussed. He said, I just thought that was so effing deep when he said that.
Wow.
And it's
deep in a good way or bad
deep
way?
in a good way.
Okay.
Because the idea that there's that consideration and there's that idea of how do you use humor to poke fun at racists instead of being racist, which in
Okay.
comedy too often, Saturday Night Live especially, is on the other side of that.
Right.
But this time they were using it to talk about it, and they're pointing out a very true thing. Although I would add on top of that, while there is reverence for African American history in mainstream sports coverage, there is not even close to the same respect for the current crop of African American athletes. I mean, it's like to use a variance on a famous phrase. It's like sports coverage. They love African American culture and the past, while not really seeming to like African Americans in the present.
Right. And that's the problem. That's always been a problem, and probably will be here until we are able to broach that discussion. And it may be because some outspoken, undeniably great athlete who is unexpandable, who you just, who the Michael Jordan caliber in play
Right.
will actually be of Muhammad Ali caliber and speak.
Right, who you can't touch.
Right.
I mean, and that's the tricky part. Is
And
that
we
the
have
reason
a lot.
why? Sorry,
We
go
have a
ahead.
lot of great athletes who are very quiet, and that's been the problem. They play safe.
It is true. I mean, because I think that you have an amazing group of athletes who've been public over the last 10 years with their politics, and we've seen a lot. But at the same time, have we really seen, like in the late 60s, where the greatest athletes in their given sports were also the people who were the most political?
Right.
Bill
So-
Russell, Lou Alcindor, Muhammad Ali,
Jim Brown, right.
Billie Jean King, Martina Navratilova.
Arthur Ashe.
Yes.
Yes.
That's what you don't really see. Like the people who are at the absolute top of the pyramid using the fact that they're protected
Yeah.
because they bring in so much bank.
Right, that's real talk. If you're just tuning in, we're talking with Dave Zirin. Want to say what's up to everybody. He's in the building with us. And for folks that are listening to us today, he will be appearing tonight at 7 o'clock in the city of Berkeley. What is the name of the place?
Yeah, First Presbyterian Church in Berkeley.
That's right. And
It's
you're going to
being-
be talking about Occupy the Sports?
Yeah, sports under occupation. It's specifically about the relationship between sports and people who live in the West Bank and Gaza, people who are of Palestinian descent, who are refugees, and Israeli Arabs as well.
Okay, what we're going to do, why don't we take a little break, and I want to come back, and we're going to continue our conversation with the one and only Dave Zirin.
Autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won.
Raider Nation, let's go, let's go. Raider Nation, let's go, let's go. Raider Nation, are you ready for some football? You ain't ready for no football. You ain't ready for the Oakland Raiders. It's the invasion of the Oakland Raiders. Are you ready for some football? You ain't ready for this football. Here we come, baby. Just win, baby. Feel the storm of the cold autumn wind, baby. It's the Oakland Raiders. Get your mouthpiece. You in the black hole with the black beast. This ain't black gold, this is black silver. Commitment to excellence, we deliver. And we'll play past regulation. It's the invasion of the Raider Nation. Let's go, let's go. Raider Nation. Let's go, let's go. Raider Nation. Are you ready for some football? Yeah. You ain't ready for no football. You ain't ready for the Oakland Raiders. Come on. It's the invasion of the Oakland Raiders. Let's go. Are you ready for some football? Yeah. You ain't ready for this football.
Okay. I had to play the Raider Nation.
Yeah.
And for people who don't know, we often forget Dave Zirin, who's our guest, is actually an acute sportsman. We a lot of us who know you, especially that listen to us on our airwaves or see us, they know you because you are politically astute. So we bring you in, we go, yeah, Dave does Edge of Sports, and then we talk to you about everything else. What's your opinion about Gaza? What do you think about this and the other? But, this one day I got on you and I was like, how come you never give any love to the Raiders? And the Raiders were on a roll at this point in time. They were starting to win. There was talk of the playoff. Hugh Jackson was the coach. Everybody, Darren McFadden was the leading rusher. And, somebody like me who's a Raider fan, I'm just like, this is it. We are bound for championship. And I asked you, why don't you ever give the Raiders any love in your column? And what did you tell me?
Well, I said I have in the past given them a lot of love, but the signing of Carson Palmer as their quarterback was such a crippling move that I thought would have a terrible reverberation down the franchise.
Now, at the time, I thought you were crazy.
Yes.
And what did I have to do at the end of the season?
You had to say, Dave Z, you know your stuff. Well played, sir. And I had to just sort of tip my cap and say I appreciate that you're man enough to say, well done, Dave. You're right about that. But I was thinking of you the other day because I thought how disappointed you must be that the Raiders haven't been caught up in this bounty scandal in the NFL. Like, of all the people, of all the teams.
I was going to ask you about that. For people who don't know, talk about the bounty scandal. What is this about?
Oh, absolutely. Right now, the New Orleans Saints and possibly some other teams as well are facing serious penalties. I mean, we're talking like fines, loss of draft picks, suspension of coaches. One coach, Greg Williams, their former defensive coordinator, is even threatened with a lifetime ban from the sport. And it's all based around this idea that the New Orleans Saints were paying players, special little kiddies, everybody throwing in money and paying players for knocking out the other team's star player, for having them carted off the field or really ringing them up. And the NFL has chosen to go nuclear about this. I mean, we're talking like a 50,000-page report, huge publicity. I mean, it's the NFL that's shedding all the light on this. And I have a theory about why they're doing it, about why they're making it such a huge deal.
What's the theory?
Well, the theory is that the NFL is a $9 billion a year business. They have internal projections that I've seen that show that it can be as much of as a $25 billion business. I mean, this is
The
insane.
NFL?
Yeah, over the next 20
Wow.
years. Huge.
So stop there for a second, because just the other day, presidential candidate Mitt Romney said, NASCAR owners were his friends.
Yeah.
But also said the NFL
owners are his friends.
So we're talking about, this dude is really in the uber 1%.
Uber 1%. NFL owners, I mean, you're talking about the Billionaires Club, if you want to be in there. I mean, they're so choosy. Multi-billionaire club. They're so choosy, they kick people out who they don't want. I mean, they do, and that's why every single NFL owner is white. And that's true with a lot of pro sports teams, but I think in the NFL in particular, for example, during this last labor struggle, the optics of it were really bad because you've got a league that has a 100% injury rate. There, 70% of the players are African American, squaring off against an entirely white ownership group led by Roger Goodell.
Right.
And that divide between one group that's trying desperately to keep this golden goose fat and happy, and another group that's not just concerned about money, I'm talking about the players, but also about their long-term physical health.
Right.
That's what makes this violence issue so volcanic.
Right.
Because it's about the past, present, and future of how the NFL shows itself to the public as how it regulates violence. Let me explain what I mean by that. When we talk about the past, it's because right now there are 6 mass class action lawsuits that the NFL is facing from former players who are saying that they were crippled for life by the league, mentally or physically.
Right.
And that could be a huge payout to them to make those lawsuits go away. And so this is about Goodell telling the judicial industry that, hey, we take violence seriously. Look at us coming down on these bounties.
Right.
The present, they want to go to an 18-game season because they know that's going to mean so much more money, and they need to sell the idea that the sport is not so violent and brutal. But then the future about violence is why the NFL is making such a big deal out of this. I've spoken to some heads who are high up in this thing, and their sort of existential fear, like the sort of thing, they know that baseball is never going to be more popular than the NFL ever again.
Right.
They know they got basketball. They know NASCAR is a regional sport. They know NFL is king. But they also know they have an Achilles heel, and it's called the boxing Achilles heel. And it's the idea that the NFL could go the way of boxing. Boxing was once the most popular sport in this country, and then you had generations of parents, school administrators, etc., going out of their way to keep kids away from boxing. They look at Muhammad Ali. They look at boxers like Pernell Whitaker, Meldrick Taylor, Julio Cesar Chavez. They see the brain injuries, and they've kept kids away from it. And now boxing is a regional sport at this point.
Right, and we're not playing football overseas the way we are.
Exactly.
You know, basketball is an overseas sport.
Basketball can always expand.
So you can always get people, but football's not. Football
It's an internal market sport.
Well, football is here, but football everywhere else around the world is soccer.
Exactly, and people overseas, they call, I got a buddy in Puerto Rico, he calls football in the United States football imperialismo. He's like, we got real football, you've got football imperialismo. And our football imperialismo is huge, but as you were saying, it is regional. It has
Right.
borders.
Right.
And that in and of itself creates an issue of where the talent pool is going to necessarily come from. And if you have generations of parents keeping their kids away from it, then conceivably the popularity level of it could sink dramatically.
Well, let me ask you this. You know, thinking of just, you know, let me just first ask you a sports question, just with the Raiders.
Sure.
Okay. First of all, how are we going to do now? What's your thoughts on it?
Well, look, you have the grand advantage of being in what is by far the weakest division in all of the NFL. I mean, you always have a shot at being a mediocre champion, at being the 8-8 playoff run team in that division. Now, that might change if the Broncos sign Peyton Manning. That's a bit of a game changer.
You were speaking on that. Now, Peyton Manning, they're looking at that, and you're saying if they get Peyton Manning, no more Tebow.
No more Tebow. Tebow would be gone. Tebow would be jettisoned.
Would Tebow come to the Raiders?
No, he wouldn't want to come to the Raiders. How long would he last in Raider Nation? Imagine Tim Tebow coming out here. First night, goes out with the Raiders fans. What happens?
Right.
Wakes up the next morning with his head shaved and a mohawk, naked on a bus. And then all of a sudden, no more Tim Tebow. No, he'd be signed by Jacksonville in a heartbeat. They have a new owner. They need to fill that stadium. It's got the lowest attendance in the NFL. He's from the Jacksonville area, went to Florida.
Right.
That's where he would go. And if Peyton Manning went to the Broncos, it would solve two major headaches for John Elway right away. The first being that the Tebow Maniacs, I called them the T-Hottists,
right.
but some people didn't like that too much, or the Tebow Jihadists. But they're that crazy, man. Trust me, I criticize Tebow. It's like Twitter goes crazy on me, you know. But Tim Tebow, like no fan would say, how dare you bring in Peyton Manning? So it would silence the Tebow fanatics.
Right.
And then the second thing it would do, it was like for the first time you would have a quarterback who wasn't playing in John Elway's shadow.
Right.
With John Elway bringing him in. So it would break that sort of Elway curse.
John Elway didn't like Tebow too much.
No. John Elway, I'm quoting Tony Kornheiser, sports writer here, who I think said it perfectly. He says when John Elway is looking for the perfect quarterback for the Denver Broncos, he looks in the mirror and says, I got to find someone who looks like that.
Right.
And then you look at Tim Tebow, who throws a football like he's tossing a ham-shaped grenade, you know, like just crazy awkward. And that he sees that, and he just like his face goes white. But at the same time, he brought the Broncos back, got them into the playoffs. But you asked about the Raiders. Carson Palmer did something very smart this offseason, in that he restructured his contract. He's going to be taking less money. It's going to be spread out over more years.
So he's going to stay?
You're going to have him around, and that's not great for you.
Wow.
It wasn't smart to jettison Jason Campbell. I hated that decision at the time.
So Campbell's gone.
Campbell's going to be somewhere else this fall. Absolutely. He's done.
Wow.
Carson Palmer is your starting quarterback. And his arm is just like, he reminds me of like a baseball pitcher who's lost his fastball.
Let me ask you this, and I don't know, maybe I should play another song for a second.
Because you're a little depressed?
No. I want to play another song, and now we're going to get into a little bit of politics.
Okay.
This is what you do best. I want to play the 49ers, okay, because the Raiders and the Niners and the Golden State Warriors, they all have something in common. We'll come back and talk about that. But why don't we play the Niner theme song?
Who's got it better than us? 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 Who's got it better than us?
Who got it better? Nobody. To the field from the tailgate party. SFC, yeah, we still G's, but we crushing and hitting every damn thing. If it ain't real, it ain't right. If you can't take a hit, take a hike. The legendary Super Bowl champ said right. A classic connection, Montana to Rice. Field motor section, mission to Diamond Heights. Bayview District, Sunday and Monday nights. Let's ball. If the Niners on y'all, that's the right call. I got one question, tell them hardball.
Who's got it better than us? Who's got it better than us? Who's got it better than us? Who's got it better than us?
Nobody!
So there you have it, my man Bailey. So I had to play this, right?
Long way from the Super Bowl shuffle.
Yes, long way.
My
So you
name
have
is
Ice
Fridge,
Cube.
and I'm the rookie.
You have Ice Cube. Before that, the Loonies doing the theme songs for the Raiders. You have Bailey really putting the heart and soul into
Beautiful.
the Niners. And I bring this up because, you know, those artists are often reflective of these communities that many times are marginalized, not always having a voice. And these sports teams become something much, much bigger than what we may anticipate. So when Bailey does that song, and you see the video as you see, it gives light to San Francisco, in particular black San Francisco.
Absolutely.
You know, when Ice Cube does his songs, there's a rate of pride. Everybody pumps out their chest. But now the Raiders and the Niners, they're leaving their respective cities. And I wanted to talk about that because you have these fervent fan bases that have been loyal. People go out and buy the material, the gear. They show up, you know, tooth and nail, will spend their last dollar to go to a game. But you take a guy like Bailey who just did this song, now it's the Santa Clara 49ers. You know, Cube, of course, has already made it, but when the Loonies did this song about silver and black, it was a pride of Oakland. And many of us are now looking at the possibility of the Raiders leaving Oakland again. On top of that, you have the Golden State Warriors, who just traded another player, who's at Monte Ellis, who will probably go on to be the Hall of Fame, but that's a whole other thing. So they want to leave. And what is the responsibility to these teams that have become fixtures in the lives of people, especially in hard economic times? These teams take on even heightened importance when these billionaire clubs just pick them up and go, we're going to move to another place and call it a day.
Yeah, the actions of the Bay Area ownership groups, and I would extend that around the country, have largely been shameful. And if there's one thing that I think we should all say when you look at the sports landscape, is that pro sports owners have become superfluous to the process of enjoying and watching sports.
Superfluous meaning unnecessary?
Yes.
Okay.
We pay for the stadiums.
That's right, because
yes. We pay for the stadiums.
Our tax dollars, ladies and
Our
gentlemen.
tax dollars. It's general managers make the decision of who gets on the field, and players make the plays. Owners are unnecessary. They exist only to figure out how to make the teams as profitable as possible at our expense. And we could operate this in a profoundly different way if every team actually operated on the Green Bay model and created fan ownership systems.
So the Green Bay Packers, you always like them because it's
I like
a union,
them for this reason, because the owner. People ask me who's the best owner in sports. Now it's the 360,000 owners of the Green Bay Packers. I mean, they sold shares for fans. It was 112,000. They sold an extra 250,000 shares. Fans bought them. You buy shares, you don't get a dividend off of it. All you get is a piece of paper that says, I'm part owner of the Green Bay Packers. You don't even get a frame to put the piece of paper in. But by being a part owner of the Packers, this is what you're insured. You are insured that your team will never move or leave. You are insured that you're not going to have some owner who thinks that they know more than a general manager or a coach just because they've got the biggest paycheck.
Do they have voting like a regular corporation?
No. There's a board of directors that they can play a role in helping to try to get on. But by and large, the board of directors is chosen, and then there's a team president.
So is this symbolic to be an owner?
It's symbolic, and the other thing that shows it's almost like showing your support for your community.
Okay.
And the other thing about it that I really like is that, and I say this because there are a lot of sportscasters who are laughing at the Green Bay fans for buying those shares. It's like, you're not even getting a dividend. Ha, 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 you're so stupid. And it's like, are they any more stupid than people who get their tax dollars taken out of their pockets and have their teams move anyway? I mean, at least in the Green Bay model, it's voluntary. Like, if you live in Green Bay and you're not a football fan, it's not like you're paying for it.
Right.
No, people are choosing to do it.
Okay, I see how that model works.
And
okay.
60% of the concessions at Green Bay go to local charities. I mean, imagine how amazing it would be if every time you saw a 49ers jersey or a Raiders jersey, you knew that there was a significant chunk of that money going directly back into the community instead of directly into the pocket of that pubescent teenager who owns the 49ers, Jed York, or that creepy little dude now who Al Davis's son who owns the Raiders. Was it Mark Davis, I think his name?
You called him creepy.
Man, he's a creepy looking dude. And I mean, I'm just saying that, like, we don't need these. I mean, look, what is their contribution now to the 49ers and the Raiders? Their contribution is threatening to leave unless they get more tax money.
What about just the psychological effect? Bailey just did that song. Now it's the Santa Clara 49ers.
Exactly.
Oakland identified, even when the Raiders were in L.A., I mean, it was far enough that you could be like, they're still the Oakland Raiders to me. Mm-hmm. But now if they move to San Jose or some other place, or even back to L.A., because L.A. is now actively courting an NFL team with all the new infrastructure in downtown, what does this mean? And Oakland, who is like in debt monumentally, had to do this emergency meeting to try and keep them. And it's not just the Raiders, but we're also looking at the A's, and we're looking at the Golden State Warriors, all wanting to jettison out of Oakland. I mean, how does this impact a community and a city?
It pays a hell of a psychological price for that. And this is part of the problem. I think modern sports owners, they're people who come out of the financial sector, and they have a spreadsheet mind in terms of how they see the success of their teams. I mean, they are for short-term profits over the needs of long-term stability. And so it's even like it's not even just for people who are for economic justice or tax justice. This is for people who are sports fans. Have to realize that a whole generation of sports fans, young sports fans, the people who really give the energy to sports, are going to be cut out of the process if they move to Santa Clara, if they move out of the cities. Because the city is where there's the life, and the city is where there's the passion. And that's something that you can't put on a spreadsheet. And the idea that they exploit that passion so much. They use these teams like neoliberal Trojan horses and say, hey, if you support your team, you got to give us more money and more money and more money. And it's just take and take and take. And yet, in the meantime, what message does it send also when these new mega stadiums open? It says the future of jobs is non-union service industry work. And it's like it's not something that builds sustainable cities. One urban economist said it well. He said, you got your typical billion-dollar stadium. Your city would do better if a plane went in the air and just dumped $1 billion on the city and let people just pick up the money and spend it as opposed to spending it on a stadium.
That's real talk. You're doing a talk, at First Congregational Church.
Yeah, I said the name wrong.
Right?
I said the name wrong.
You're doing a talk, First Congregational Church, tonight, Wednesday, up at Berkeley. Occupy the Sports. Is this related to Occupy? When we talk about just the way that these billionaires are really exploiting us, or is there a whole other take that you have?
Well, it's interesting because I got I got a bag from the group that brought me here, Middle Eastern Children's Alliance, terrific charity, they a terrific organization. They gave me a bag that said Occupy Wall Street, not Palestine, and I think it is interesting. Like, and I know that's been a big conversation here in Oakland about like the use of the word occupation, and I would argue that there's a proud history of oppressed peoples occupying areas, like, for example, the Native American movement occupying Alcatraz, for example, people occupying lunch counters and occupying the streets. And I think it's like we do need more people's occupations, not military occupations. And the interesting thing when it relates to sports is that, to me, people's occupation is about the democratization of sports, about not taking our tax dollars for sports, about making sure that our public schools have enough funding so kids can have access to actual physical education, which is on the chopping block at way too many schools around this country. Local youth teams. I'm reading this book right now that's blowing my mind called The Most Expensive Game in Town, and it's about the way that youth sports today are becoming or have already become the province of the privileged. Like, if you want your kid to play youth sports, the amount, and this is a huge cultural change in this country that hasn't been talked about, is that it used to be that, like, the programs were just there.
Right.
And you went up to the Boys and Girls Club, you signed up, and you were in a league, and you played. But in this era of AAU, traveling Little League teams, traveling football teams, your parents better be ready to either make serious financial sacrifices or find a sugar daddy who you'll be embedded to forever if you're a big-time player.
Sponsor.
Oh, yes, a sponsor.
So they're already
Sounds
going
so
to middle high. They're already going to middle schools. I don't think people realize that now the mentality of people in professional sports is like, go down to the middle school in East Oakland and find out who may be the potential next Michael Jordan.
They have lists of top 50 middle schoolers in the country, and just to look at those lists and see these names and see how young these kids are, it's like looking at child pornography.
Wow. And then they come up and sponsor them for these leagues, and then boom, they're embedded.
They're embedded.
Wow.
And then it's like a long-term investment.
Wow.
And so that's part of occupying
some sort of
sports.
sharecropping type of situation.
Oh yeah, it is.
Wow.
It is. And it's like it's what happens when these young people, that before they're even old enough to shave, they become brands unto themselves. And so then they're taught this way about, like, how do I build in my brand? And then they're also very isolated from broader communities. And I just interviewed this amazing young man, Joseph Williams, who's a football player at the University of Virginia. He's doing a hunger strike on campus. For a living wage for campus workers.
Right.
And he spoke about the degree to which, like, his coaches went up to him, and it started with them just being concerned about his health. Like, hey, are you sure you should be doing this hunger strike? But then taking it from there to you're giving the team a bad name. And I asked Joseph Williams about, like, what does he think needs to change for NCAA players? Should they be paid? Like a lot of people say. Like, what do you think the answer is to make it more just? And the first thing, he spoke about a lot of things, but the first thing to come out of his mouth is, how do we make athletes on campuses more a part of their community? Because right now, it's not the case. Like, on most schools, if there's a movement at a school, the athletes are so segregated from it, they don't even know what's happening.
Well, they used to threaten them with scholarships, but now the whole branding thing jumps in, because now not only are we looking at the schools and professional franchises, but we're also looking at the commerce the folks that are looking, going, you're not going to get the deal with Nike. You're not going to get the deal with any number of
the big corporate godfathers
right,
of the sport.
Let me ask you this: with the new contracts that some of these sports guys are signing, is it like the music business where the team gets a piece of the action? LeBron James, he got to give a piece of his Nike to whatever team. Is that starting to happen now?
No, to my knowledge, no, that's not happening. That they're exclusively located with the players themselves.
Okay.
And the players get to keep that money. But what it also, though, those contracts do is that it muzzles the players if they want to make sure that they keep those contracts, because all these contracts have clauses in them about personal conduct. And personal conduct can mean I disagree with what's happening in the West Bank and Gaza. That could be personal conduct. You know, actually using your freedom of speech is personal conduct. And it's not uncommon now for players to sign statements of team integrity or statements of principled unity when they enter a team. And sometimes those principles of unity are about, like, not bringing politics into the locker room.
Wow.
Meanwhile, organizations like Fellowship for Christian Athletes, Athletes in Action, they're in practically every locker room in sports. And I'm not saying that they should be shut out, but I think we would be incredibly naive if we didn't see that those organizations have their own political agenda.
Well, even Tim Tebow,
oh my
you know, that was brought up.
Well, that's one of the things that really upset me when people were saying to me, like, hey, you criticize Tim Tebow, but not Jeremy Lin. They're both really Christian, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, look, I have no problem with Tim Tebow that he's a Christian. What do I care about what religion he is? That's his business. I care about the intersection between the evangelical movement and the right wing of American politics, and the fact that Tim Tebow is very comfortable with organizations like Focus on the Family, with politicians like Michelle Bachmann and Rick Perry. That's his home, and he's talking about having a political career after he plays football.
But then at the same time, we were very critical of what's his name, folks from like
Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf.
Right, well, the Muslim players.
Yeah.
I was thinking of the guy from the Steelers and others. You know,
Rashard Mendenhall.
you know, so they start speaking out or showing support, and then all of a sudden it becomes like, how dare you?
Rashard Mendenhall lost his endorsements. That means he lost hundreds of thousands of dollars playing in a sport, by the way, where any game could be your last.
Right.
Because he dared challenge the celebratory atmosphere that existed in this country after the assassination of Osama bin Laden.
Right.
You know, and it's not like he even went out and made a big speech. He just put out some tweets.
Yeah.
And the backlash was insane. And that's just one of the things I've always pointed out, which is like, look, if you're calling for free speech for Tebow, then how can you not call for it for everybody? And if you don't, all you're really doing is revealing your horns to the public. We've
been talking with Dave Zirin. We'll take another break, play another song. And we're going to come back and conclude with the man who does the edge of sports. We'll be right back.
Uh-huh. Know what it is? Let it Uh-huh. Know what it is? Let it run around one more time. Drop something on y'all. It's like my microphone's a Glock 9. Black, I'm dipped in that. The beat's my mash. Jam you for the platinum you have. Run it. The illest, watch me become it. I'm here, then took Ebola like straight to the wig. Speak truth like kids, tell you what you don't know. And Kobe, yeah, he's real with the flow. I put the ice in niceness. I'm too broke to pay attention, and my style is priceless. If you hear me say murder, that means I'm a thug poet. If I say my mind kills, that means I'm a thug poet. If I say that I'm a Glock, that means I'm a thug poet. And when I lay you down, that makes me a thug poet. Thug poet. Thug poet. Thug poet. Thug poet. Thug poet. Thug poet.
Everybody know 50 don't know how to act. I run up on cats with gats and aluminum bats. Y'all got fat while we starve. It's my turn. I done felt how a slug burn. I still won't learn. As it gets in the hood to tell you, 50 crazy. I have your mom screaming, they done shot my baby. Son, I yap your shine. I clap the nine. I slap you. I'm not one of them who she can wanna with. I spit the to keep you listening, keep my wrist glistening. I left my getting alone and they still think I'm dissing. I'm on some new issue. S-type baby blue ish. Talk behind my back, but don't do ish. I ain't looking for love, dope. I'm looking for respect, I leave you with options. Like die, I hit the deck. I'm a thug poet, you know it. I came for the dough. Clap, clap, gun the jig, the on the flow.
If you hear me saying murder, that means I'm a thug poet. If I say my mind kills, that means I'm a thug poet. If I say that I'm a Glock, that means I'm a thug poet.
So that was a fun song we put together. That was, we found the a cappella of Kobe, who was trying to act like he was hard, call himself a thug poet. We had Nas talking about this. And then we had 50. We found the a cappella, my boys from 3 a.m. We put together a beat, actually from the Bay Area compilation of funk bands, and just had fun with this and put it out there and made it seem like it was a real song. But I played this,
great.
not to talk about the Lakers, even
Not
though
to
that's
talk
my
about
team.
Kobe?
Not to talk, that's my team, though. But
Don't you wish, though, you could bet, like, on the stock market on weird stuff? Like, when Kobe was 21 and married a teenager he met on a rap video, I was like, man, I wish I can bet stock that this marriage probably isn't built to last.
Well, there you go. I mean, but he came out as young kid. But what I was getting at, because 50 is in there, and that's what I wanted to play, the intersection between hip hop and sports. But when you look at it in these other senses, 50 selling the sports water, 50 working with and hanging out with Money Mayweather, Kobe, Shaq, Iverson, all these people putting out records, Jay-Z, now with the Nets. What's that about? Is that a good thing, bad thing, or is this just a natural transition where you have these worlds coming together? Chuck D, good friend of yours, has often said that these are the peers. If you went into the music business or you went into the sports business, now we're seeing the merging, and oftentimes it's the rap artists that are coming out, ironically, interestingly enough, and making some big power moves on that side, 50 and Jay-Z, versus when you have the Ron Artestas and others who have invested in record labels and that didn't do as well.
Right,
you see what I'm saying?
Well, that's because, money spends no matter where you want to put it, but musical talent you actually have to have.
Right.
The prerequisite. But you know what? It's interesting. Is I think it just exposes something that Chuck D has been saying for years, which only has become more acute with time. Is that you can't talk about hip hop as if it's a monolithic form, and you have different kinds of hip hop. You have different politics in hip hop, and you have different agendas in hip hop.
Right.
And I mean, the agenda of someone like Talib Kweli, who's performing at Occupy Wall Street, is obviously very different than someone like Jay-Z, who tries to come out with some Occupy gear before he gets so much criticism.
And tells you to watch the throne,
exactly,
which is owned by Wall Street.
Exactly. And
or even the just situation that he had in Brooklyn where he had those displaced people for the Nets Stadium, and they were mad at him.
I don't know if you've heard the Yassine Bey song to the beat of N-word in Paris. It says the N-word.
Talking about most deaths. Yeah.
And that's just hilarious rhyme. And he's parodying that whole approach. It says, like, look at our wealth. And the thing in Brooklyn, I mean, is just so acute because, I mean, who has attempted, other than, I guess, Diddy, but who has tried to do more to wrap himself in Biggie's memory than Jay-Z? I mean, that's been Jay-Z's stock and trade. And yet here's Biggie, who's the king of Brooklyn, the man who is Brooklyn in so many ways, and the person who's his, who at least tries to, be his legacy, Jay-Z, has uprooted people in Brooklyn for the purposes of this new arena, the Atlantic Yards project, teaming with a billionaire named Bruce Ratner and a corrupt Russian mafiosa billionaire, Mikhail Prokhorov, and conjoining together and showing that it's not black white, it's not U.S. Russia, it's green,
right? And
there's money in Brooklyn.
But what about 50? 50 made a smart move, no? Or is it because it's with the whole water thing?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he did very well for himself.
Okay.
No doubt about it. It's in what do you do with your money? How do you reinvest it? I mean, there's a lot of power in green, and there's a lot of power in people, but it's like the ability to put that money somewhere where it could actually do some good and empower people.
Well, he was just recently in Somalia, talking about, trying to bring an end to the war and the peace. And I think a lot of people were surprised at that.
That's good. I mean, I think that's where sometimes a lot of people find themselves at that crossroads and say, okay, I've got this money. What am I going to do with it? And then most people just try to reinvest, do what Jay-Z is doing. And he's obviously, I mean, what did he do? He copyrighted his own daughter's name right away or something?
Right.
I mean, other people are trying to do something different. So I applaud him for that. And I just did a forum with some NFL players Greg Jennings, who's a wide receiver for the Packers, Dahani Jones, who played in the NFL, and they're all going on this trip to Somalia.
Right.
And to Riley, try to go there and bring back their experience, and I'm all for that. Like, I'm all for people trying to leverage their fame to try to do something, because one of the things that I think we realize, I know you realize this, is that hip-hop artists, athletes, they're role models whether we want them to be role models or not.
Right.
So, we could say, oh, why aren't firefighters role models? But we can also say, why isn't the sky green? I mean, you can only wail about that for so long. And
Right.
to me, a much more constructive question is, if athletes and musicians are role models, then what are they modeling?
Right.
What are they modeling? Because not everyone's going to be an athlete or a music star, but anybody can model a certain set of behaviors that's about being socially responsible and socially engaged.
That's real talk. I'd be remiss if we didn't remind folks that Hammer is also somebody who's entered into that
Yes.
sports arena with his...
And was at Occupy.
who was at Occupy, but Hammer, of course, managing a lot of the... the mixed martial artists, so we need to, note that. And he came out of sports because
Yes.
they invested in him.
Well, he started,
and he was
of
one
course-
of the he was one of the few who actually, did well
Yeah,
when the sports money came.
And he is a young man. He was dancing in front of the A Stadium, of
Yeah.
course.
And doing this,
And you know why he got the name Hammer from? You probably know this, though. Right?
looking like Hank Aaron.
Exactly.
There you go.
Exactly. And you see, like, pictures of a young Stanley Burrell next to Henry Aaron, and it is an uncanny resemblance.
As we get ready to close out, we're in the Bay Area, so we got to ask you the $85,000 question. There's a little city next to us, a little bit down the road, or a state next to us called Nevada. If you go down the road about 400 miles, there's Las Vegas, and that is the home to Money Mayweather. But here in the Bay Area, people might say this is, second home to Pacquiao.
That's right. Filipino.
The boxing thing. Pacquiao, Mayweather, will that ever happen? Bob Arum, the acumen that Mayweather has used in terms of being able to,
Oh, yes.
really own every aspect of the fights that are promoted. Is Pacquiao cheater? Is Mayweather going to lose? What's your take on it?
Mayweather comes from the business, of course. His
Right.
uncle and his father deep in the business. So
Right.
he has done a terrific job at, I guess the best way to put it would be at exploiting himself.
Yeah.
And
Well,
also,
if you're going to exploit yourself.
and
right?
also, like, being a young, talented African-American in boxing, that in and of itself an incredible rarity these days.
Right.
And it happens because he is a legacy coming out of the industry. And when it comes to Pacquiao, I mean, my goodness. I mean, the pride that people feel in Manny Pacquiao is unbelievable. I think the fight is going to happen, even if it happens at some point when they're in wheelchairs. And I'll tell you why it's going to happen. There is not one fight left in all of boxing that has this kind of appeal. I mean, there used to be like 5 or 6 fights that people would be hyped over, and when's this going to happen? When's this going to happen? It's like the last fight standing. And for that, in and of itself, when you have something that so much of this sport is going to depend upon, I mean, think about the fights that are on that undercard. Think about the fights that they'll try to hype out of that fight. I mean, so there is going to be a magnetic pull to get those two men in the ring and settle this once and for all.
But you're avoiding the question, who will win?
Oh, I'm not avoiding that question. I think Manny Pacquiao would win that fight, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because as good as
Now,
Mayweather...
everybody just lit up Twitter, and
Yeah.
because they say Pacquiao is not good when it comes to the defenses. Mayweather is a boxer's boxer.
Incredibly swift.
Right.
But Pacquiao is the only fighter I have ever seen in my life move up in weight class and actually keep or increase his punching power. I think I would knock Mayweather out. I think it would be in the later rounds, 8th or 9th rounds. And I think it would just take a couple of really, really hard
You don't
knocks.
think Mayweather would be able to counter him? Because that's the argument.
See, but that's the thing. How do you counter somebody if you're seeing stars? And that's what Pacquiao brings to the table, man. I mean, he can punch a hole through a wall. And that's why Mayweather makes such this big deal about, like, yeah, let's make this happen, but take blood from Pacquiao right before the fight. I want regular blood tests from him. Because he and a lot of people in boxing don't see how Pacquiao moves up and gets stronger. I mean, look at somebody like Roy Jones, for example, kept moving up in weight class, but was a weaker puncher as he did. That's more typical.
Right.
And yet Pacquiao, I mean, my goodness, he
So
hits
how's
like
he
a ton.
doing that? Is he taking something?
I mean, I refuse to speculate on those hypotheses only because not only who knows, but also because the incentives to do it are so great. Look, if someone had a pill that said it's going to make me a better sports writer, I'd be like, line them up.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, it just, the incentives are so great to do it, and the masking agents are so intense. It's just impossible to say. But I will say this, no, and not that this precludes him taking anything, but nobody, and I mean nobody, trains like Manny Pacquiao. I mean, the stories are just legendary of his endurance and his training regimen and his seriousness once he steps in that ring. And also the thing about Pacquiao is that you get the feeling that he's fighting for something bigger. I mean, Manny Pacquiao might someday be the prime minister of the Philippines, for goodness sakes. And I mean, he's got an agenda that goes on for decades. And I think sometimes when fighters have that, when they're fighting for something, they fight with less of a desperate feel to them. Okay. And there's something about Mr. Mayweather, about Money Mayweather, where he fights sometimes as if he doesn't know what he's going to do when the fight is over. So he's constantly looking for that next fight.
That's real talk. We've been talking with Dave Zirin. He will be appearing tonight at the First Congregational Church in Berkeley. That's off Channing Way, starting at 7. It's a benefit for the Middle East Children's Alliance, and he's going to be talking about Occupy the Sports. My last question for you, I want to go, and we'll end here. Harry Edwards, who I took classes with, when I took classes with him, he talked about the fact that there were certain ethnic groups, in particular African Americans, that dominated sports because it was a narrowed field in terms of opportunity. So everybody went down these routes. So you wound up having, domination in all these arenas. And, and he would have debates about, folks that were saying, the whole thing with melanin and all this other stuff. But he was pretty clear that it was more of a socialized thing. And he would make the argument in class that there's some fast white dude on working on Wall Street who could probably, do the 3-minute mile, but he's working on Wall Street and he's not trying to do the sports thing.
I strongly agree with that.
With that being said, with Jeremy Lin, coming back to him, does this open the door, in your opinion, where you now have a lot of Asian kids, many who are now 3rd and 4th generation, growing up in urban areas, that are now inspired to go out there and start entering into this arena and becoming, a new force.
Most definitely.
You think that's going to be the case?
Absolutely. But I also think the power of Jeremy Lin is that he inspires people of Asian descent to be less invisible and to say that, like, okay, we can actually be public figures in this society. Because you think about the paucity of public figures of Asian descent that the United States media allows to be seen and heard. I mean, whether you're talking about politics or entertainment or what have you. And I think that's the promise of Jeremy Lin. Is that
does he overshadow a Bruce Lee?
Oh, I think he does. And that's with all the love in the world for Bruce Lee. But I've always felt that Bruce Lee is more of an international phenomenon. And because Bruce Lee, did...
but
obviously
that was
Jeet
saying
Kune
how much
Do.
we started off with the basketball video,
Sure.
where you had all the people doing the karate
kung
in the
fu.
background, but that was inspired from Bruce.
But that was also because you and I are of a generation where we grew up with 3 channels and we watched Fists of Fury every weekend. I mean, so kung fu played a huge role in our lives.
Right.
And Jeet Kune Do, or whatever you want to call it, that Bruce did. And I know I'm a Bruce Lee fanatic. And it unbelievable what he was able to do. And I think if he had lived, I mean, he would have brought all kinds of swagger to the 1980s.
Yeah.
But that's not, of course, what happened. I mean, Jeremy Lin holds the promise of visibility, and I think that's his power. And I also think what Harry Edwards said is absolutely correct. Cornel West, who we did a panel with because he wrote the foreword to the John Carlos book, he said this thing that was just so profound. He said, look, we live in a society that more than anything else extols greatness. And for generations to be African American meant if you were going to show that you were great, sports was the place where you would show your greatness. I mean, even in entertainment for too many generations, it was about playing the fool. But in sports, it's like you could be great and be acknowledged as being great. And sports was just a means to that end.
Something to think about, something to end on. Dave Zirin, I want to thank you. We can catch his books The most recent one is
John Carlos.
the
story.
John Carlos story, and John Carlos, of course, being
How'd
on
that
our
go
show.
when you interviewed him? Was that
It was
fun?
good. That was epic.
It's a trip, right?
He doesn't like Brett Busberger.
No.
Boy, oh boy, we brought that up, man.
Ooh.
He's a big guy. You forget
Yes.
he played football.
Yes.
I was like, oh, hey, I'm
Yes.
I'm just asking. But no,
And
he was
he's on
great.
the other side of 65 now.
Yeah.
But like I once had this guy come up to me. We were doing a talk, and he said, "I used to watch." This is what he said to me. His exact words. He said, "Look, I used to go watch him train and just go out there because he just was like this. Like he was sculpted.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, imagine him at 25 running that track."
No, he's a good guy, and he talked a lot. It was very inspiring. Tonight, it's going down. Dave Zirin, if you're in the city of, if you're in the Bay Area, First Congregational Church, Occupy the Sports is what he's talking about. It is on Channing Way. So go there, be there at 7. It's a benefit for the Middle East Children's Alliance. Dave Zirin, always a pleasure to have you in the building.
My privilege, David.
Folks that's been watching us online, peace out. Everybody listening to Hard Knock Radio,
Yes.
thank you. We'll be back. Peace, everybody.
Love Hard Knock.